maybe we should get going. Hi, Faisal. Nice to see you.
Hi, Stephen. How are you?
Very well, very well.
Thanks. Welcome.
Yeah. So this is our second meeting of our working group, although we had a dedicated session on rules of origin. So in fact, we've met 3 times. This is going to be our third meeting, but we are calling it the second. So let me say hello to everyone who have joined. I was going to, we sent an agenda, I think an hour ago. So I don't know whether it's possible to have it projected on the screen. We go through it quickly, just to agree. I don't know who can help me with that from the school.
Nonsedu, can you do that?
Good morning, everyone. I'll share the agenda.
Please, yeah. Yeah, you can project it so that we quickly see how to manage the time.
Maybe while she's doing that, perhaps, Stephen, everyone can just say hello, and then we know you are there in the room. Who's in the room?
Oh, yeah, no, actually it's here. Yeah, so normally what we do, we normally get to introduce ourselves as we take the floor, so that we can cover as much as possible. But I think I'm also happy if colleagues may want to put in the chat who is present, and more importantly, the organization that you're representing, which industry, production, retail, supply, So that would be good. So this is what we are proposing to be our agenda for today's meeting. We normally have about 2 hours. So what we are proposing is, because usually there is 2 weeks at least, or 4 weeks that pass between meetings, I'm going to provide a recap of what we have done so far from the last 2 meetings. Now, if you recall, we had agreed that during this meeting, the AFCFTA Secretariat and the Tony Blair Institute would make presentation. TBI said they are working on, so they have a presentation for, or they have some ongoing work on NTBs, and also the AFCFTA Secretariat. We had agreed they would also make a presentation on the mechanisms of addressing NTMs and how things are going. Now, we will then discuss as a group, the kind of program, because I think we need to start moving towards something that eventually can come up as a report. Because, like I said, eventually we will be called upon to report back to the ministers who established these working groups. So we would want to have some structure on that can allow us to come up with a report, including some recommendations. Now, I have been facilitating, but really it is the private sector that is supposed to be guiding us, working together on resolving these issues. Maybe we may want to discuss how do we go about some of these things in terms of who could chair from the private sector, or could we have co-chairs from the private sector, or do we still continue having the advisory council rep, myself being the one to continue facilitating this. because the original idea was that the private sector would chair and rapporteur with the support of the council and the team, Nelson Mandela School team. And then we'll talk about coordinating with other working groups, because whatever we do needs to speak and to be informed also by what is going on in the other two working groups. And then we'll have the AOB very soon. So this is what we are proposing. I don't know whether there is any question, any comment on this agenda. We'll see how far we go with it. Yeah, any comment? Or if there is silence, I will take it that you agree we follow it as the agenda. Ishi. Okay, as we say here in Ethiopia, Ishi. So then we'll go to the first agenda item. So if you can let me share my screen, I will project something. Well, if I can find it, I think it's this one. Share, yeah. Then I go to, I hope you can see my screen, and I'll make it, yeah. Okay, so this is what I was going to do is to sort of give us a recap of where we have come from and where we have reached. And let me thank my colleague Brenda, who has actually been the one who put these things together. She has been listening very, very carefully, and with her expertise, it becomes easier to summarize things for me to be able to present it to you. So I'm going to talk about the recap. The recap here, where I'll talk about refresh our minds on the deliverables of our working group, summarize the first meeting. What were the key highlights of the dedicated session that we had on the rules of origin? Give some ideas on the indicative work program for our working group. And then we, of course, there is the defining of the responsibilities and the next steps. And I will try to go a little bit quickly. So on the deliverables based on the terms of reference, especially for those of you who may not have attended the first meeting or maybe came late for the first meeting, what we are expected in this working group is to identify those NTBs that are affecting the textiles and apparel sector and propose solutions. Of course, these NTBs are to be, that's why we are the private sector. It's the private sector to help us identify these NTBs and also propose solutions. Now, the second thing that we are expected to do is that the proposed solutions to these NTBs need to align and also support recommendations that are made by the other working groups. That's why it's good to have the interaction of the two. And then this working group is also supposed to support the negotiations on the rules of origin, to come up with recommendations that could actually lead to the closure, or at least to the conclusion of the rules of origin on the textiles and apparel. Now, continuing on the recap of the first meeting, what did we do? We focused on understanding our terms of reference, which of course I've just recapped. And then from that meeting, there was a good discussion whereby we appreciated the linkages with the work of the other two working groups. And then we identified, we also focused on how to identifying and initiating the work on our working group. And we agreed that whatever we do, we want to use strong evidence. And that is why we are calling on the private sector to be able to tell us what are the issues, so that we're able to use that evidence. And if we need to even do a bit more digging, we should be able to do that. The following issues on NTMs were highlighted as issues. The first one was the discussion that we had on this issue of rules of origin certification and verification process. Apparently, or at least from the evidence that was adduced by the private sector, this issue of certification and verification process, it needs to have the integrity, so that to have a good integrity, so that we don't have a situation whereby rules of origin are not playing the role that they should be playing in terms of creating jobs within the continent, or at least deepening the intra-African trade under the AfCFTA. There was also the issue of how do you deal with the disputes around the issues of TNA under the AfCFTA. So there was the issue of the whole operations of the dispute settlement mechanism in the AfCFTA as things are going. And I think one of the things here, we expect that the AfCFTA Secretariat at some stage will actually be able to come and give a bit more on this issue. It was also identified that even where you have the rules of origin and you have NTBs clearly identified and things like that, the customs capacity constraints is a major issue. And there was also an issue that was also raised that you even have situation whereby there is a facilitated origin fraud. So how do we deal with this issue so that you have integrity when it comes to trading under the AfCFTA? And so the things we agreed on that first meeting was people wanted to have a much more detailed presentation on the status of negotiations on the AfCFTA, and also NTM's mechanisms in the AfCFTA. And it's at that point where TBI and the AfCFTA Secretariat were considered to be able to present to this working group. Now, on the dedicated session on the rules of origin, we thank the Secretariat for the presentation that was made by Guillaume on behalf of the team. And out of that meeting, you will recall there were some very valuable insights that were provided. There are 2 documents that were shared with us, in addition to the comprehensive presentation. The first positive thing to note is that there is overall progress in the agreed rules of origin from 82.3% now to 90.3% as of last month. And this has meant that we have almost 95% of intra-African trade in terms of value being covered on what has been agreed under the rules of origin. But all of us know that sometimes 1% of trade could be what is really that matters when it comes also to creating the foundation for the manufacturing and the industrialization that we're anticipating under the AfCFTA. So we have 498 outstanding tariff lines out of what was presented, of which 452 relate to textiles and apparel. And so this is what came out of that presentation. And then we were also informed of the proposal from the Secretariat of the change in tariff heading rule being used for all the outstanding tariff and apparel tariff lines, subject to review after 5 years. Of course, with an exception for woven fabrics of cotton, where the process rule, subject to review after 5 years, is proposed. Now, of course, an issue was raised here. The idea was that this proposal of the review after 5 years is creating uncertainty. It's likely to create uncertainty, especially if you do not know the direction where the review will go. Will the review go towards now the double transformation, affirming double transformation, or saying, okay, we can continue with single transformation, or something in between? So So I think the private sector did express that there is some uncertainty. This proposal from the Secretariat, there's an uncertainty around this proposal from the Secretariat. So that was raised as an issue. The other point, I don't know why I'm not able to see the headings. Okay. The other thing, to continue with the issues raised, and again from the private sector, the private sector also did actually insist that sourcing is market driven, and presentation was made that the AFCFTA rules of origin may not change the status quo, whereby sourcing is driven by the demand. Then, of course, all of us were concerned that there is this continued impasse, which is on these rules of origin, and it is going to undermine the intra-African trade. And then there is need for the manufacturing sector to step up and push for the resolution of this impasse in the negotiation, so that we can start having strong benefits from the AFCFTA. So the key observations was on the divergence between the two positions, single and double transformation. It is persisting. During the conversations, there were very strong voices in favor of double transformation, with strong arguments that this would encourage investment, more value addition, and integration of the production structures across the continent. But then also, the single transformation was favored in the studies that were shared by the Secretariat, because it's easy to comply with, they're transparent, cost effective. It could also induce more preference utilization. And I think, especially for the small economies, for the LDCs yeah. So the required action from the conversation was that we need to have consensus within this working group on actionable recommendation on the AFCFTA rules of origin, and also, see clarity on scope to support rules of origin negotiators given the pace of progress. Maybe what is not captured here, I think I noticed that I had not captured it here, it was not captured here, there was also the proposal from the private sector, at least representative from Morocco, where the point of incentives to the industry towards supporting double transformation was proposed, and the key question was: is it possible for these incentives to support accumulation, so that if you're an industry within that is getting support from, let's say, the government of Morocco, and then you source your intermediate inputs from Mali, can you use that to claim the incentive that the Morocco government is giving, or any other African countries that may want? So there was that proposal about can we have a proposal around incentives that would make double transformation work. So there was that, I think, that is missing in the presentation. Then the next thing that I wanted to present is this proposed work program. We are proposing that we front load the consensus building on the recommendations to the rules of origin. I think we try to conclude our recommendations to the rules of origin negotiators. Then we identify and prioritize sector-specific NTBs. Of course, we are going to hear from the presentation. Eventually, we'll come and do the prioritization. Review and identify gaps, if any, in existing measures mechanism for resolving NTBs. And also the industry representatives to provide data on most of the pain points that will be identified on the NTBs and also on the regulatory environment. Then on fifth, take stock of existing and ongoing relevant studies. So this is work that probably teams from ECA, ITC, and everybody could do. And then we finalize by consolidating and doing a report. But as you have seen, this slide is part of the agenda. So we can come back to that later. Lastly, the next steps, I think, is mechanisms here is to hear about the presentation, and this is for today. Hear the presentation, then discuss and agree on the work program, delegate responsibilities, and see how to link with the other working groups. So that's a recap. I think it would be good. I mean, it was not, I wasn't thinking that it was going to be for discussion, but I think it would be good at least to hear the reaction, whether we have at least captured what we have discussed in the last two meetings, and then we can come back to TBI for the presentation. That's it for me for now. So the floor is open for anybody who wants to react on the presentation, because we try to capture what you have said in the last two meetings.
Oh, hello. Yes.
Yes, Etienne.
Tim Armstrong from TBI Ghana. I think the issue.
Sorry.
Tim Armstrong.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
From Tony Blair, Ghana. I think the issue with the woven fabrics of cotton, obviously the African print, could be an issue here, because many of the three printers who are making African prints tend to import it from non-African origins. So I would prefer if we could just limit that back a bit to maybe a double transformation, such as weaving, etc. And I think also the rule of origin they're currently following in ECOWAS is change of tariff subheading rather than change of tariff heading. So I'd be a bit concerned if they could only, they do source some of their grey fabric from Nigeria, which would be presumably fine. I'm not sure where Nigeria gets the cotton lint from, the fiber, but I would think that it could be a bit more flexible than that. Obviously, people in Tanzania are taking it all the way from the field and then printing it, as possibly in Ethiopia as well. So I would be a bit concerned about requiring a fiber origin rule, which is a triple transformation on the printed cotton fabrics, because it would significantly impact our three printers here in Ghana.
Thank you, Armstrong. I think we've taken note of that.
Tim, yeah,
Tim, yeah, thank you, Tim. Yeah, it shows us T Armstrong. Yeah, thank you, Tim, for that. Etienne.
Good morning, Stephen, and morning to all the colleagues. Thank you very much for the summary that you've done. I think there are two things that we discussed last week that we should possibly add. And then the third thing I wanted to mention, maybe let me start with that. We've been informed that the negotiations on HS61, in other words, the knitted garments, the rules of origin negotiations on that may have been settled in the past couple of weeks, and that the only thing that is outstanding now is a couple of, like with HS62, is a couple of exceptions that have been put forward by parties, by some of the signatories to the agreement. So it may be that this thing is running without us knowing it. And I mention that because, we may write a very nice Valentine's letter to our lover, but she seems to be married already to somebody else. So I'm just thinking, we must just be aware of what's going on, and perhaps the AFCFTA Secretariat can help with that. In terms of the two issues that I think we should also raise, the one was raised by Brenda in the last meeting, Stephen, and that's the issue of secondhand clothing, and talking about how that was undermining the growth of the industry, and that we should also include that we need to harmonize our position and our policies on secondhand clothing to ensure that it creates a space for industrialization on the continent. And then the next one was the issue of customs fraud, and how the fraud can undermine whatever rules of origin is ultimately agreed to. And the concern was especially addressed with single stage of origin, which may see products then being transshipped from other countries, just repackaged or labeled or packaged on our continent and subsequently sold as made in Africa then. So I think we should just highlight those two as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Etienne. So I don't know whether this is very useful information on the progress that has been made, because in the presentation that we had, we were saying that there were 452 tariff lines that are outstanding now. So there seems to be some progress then on a whole or more than one chapter. So I don't know where we can Faisal, Diana, maybe. Diana, are you able to help us with this information?
Hi, Stephen. Sorry, I've just joined. I was having serious trouble with my laptop.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I've just joined. I've literally just joined. But what is the question?
No, the question, no, actually it's not even so much. Okay, it's a question. So when we received the presentation from Guillaume last time, we took note that there are about 452 tariff lines for textiles and apparel, where the rules of origin are yet to be agreed. Yeah, and I think there was that proposal that for those ones, what we should do is to use this CTH rule, subject to review after 5 years. But there is some information that Etienne has shared that probably chapter 61 and chapter 62 could already have been resolved in the last couple of weeks since we started our work. Yes, Tim, while Diana
yes.
is looking.
Sorry, I was just wondering for the woven fabrics, whether we could look at a value addition rule as a third option, because obviously they're adding a lot of value with the print, which is proprietary copyright prints printed locally, plus the waxing. And I think that a value addition of 35% is, or 30% is common in ECOWAS for that particular product, but maybe you'd want to increase it to, I think, 40% we can get away with. So if there could be a third option as a value addition for the printed fabrics, because obviously that product is very relevant to Africa.
Yeah, I think from the way we are structuring the conversation, we will come back to a part where we discuss more on that. I think this was more to get reaction to this presentation, and then we can go back to the schedule that I presented, because as you have seen in my suggested work program, we are going to have sort of front-loading of the consensus building on the recommendations to the rules of origin negotiators. So what you have proposed, Tim, we will have an opportunity to discuss that as an option. No? But this is just
okay.
on the first, including what you had said earlier. This is more on the first agenda item for our meeting today. Yeah, Diana. Okay, it looks like We can't hear you, Diana.
Okay. No, I was saying, let me get my colleagues Joyce or Lucy to respond to that.
Okay,
They might be on top of the discussions that happened in Nairobi.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you. So then what we can do, if we then everyone agree, we have listened to the progress we have made. Etienne has suggested that we need to capture in the presentation the proposal that, the point that was made by Brenda in the last meeting on the second had crossing. I think in the presentation we talk about custom fraud, but maybe you want a little bit more emphasis on this in the summary. I think we will do that, and we will hear from the secretariat whether we need to amend how many tariff lines are remaining to be agreed once we hear from them. Then that being the case, then maybe we can go to the next item, of which we wanted to receive presentation from the Secretariat and TBI on mechanisms for addressing NTMs in the AFCFTA. I don't know who would go first. TBI is your study complete, because we had been promised that it would be ready by this meeting.
Yeah, so hi everyone, this is Kekeli from the Tony Blair Institute.
Hi, Kekeli. Mm-hmm.
Hi. So I've been communicating with Yiswa and is it non-tender? Sorry if I'm messing up the name. Yeah, I shared a copy of the presentation of what we have so far yesterday, but what I mentioned was when the second stage of the study, and which is the solution design, which is also going to include workshops in the 3 different countries that we're looking at for validation. That hasn't happened yet. So what I shared was I just extracted some information on the challenges as we've had them, or the key issues impeding textiles and apparel trade in Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, and Togo, as we've collected it from key actors, both private sector and public sector, over the past couple of months. So what I have today is just the key issues to add to the discussions we've been having so far. So I don't know if that works. I can still give that quick rundown. I think I had 10 minutes from the last call, as I understood. So I can do that. But then if it's better for the secretariat to have that first presentation on the mechanisms, that's fine as well. I'm happy to go with either.
Maybe it's best we hear you present so that we see what is coming out from the ground, and then we can hear from the secretariat. Yeah.
Okay. Let me. Shall I share my screen then?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Just give me a second. Let me find. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, I can see it from this side.
Okay. And at some point, so if I understood correctly, I have about 10 minutes on this. So I'm going to run through a little bit. But Tim has also been invited to the group now. And so Tim, you can also add on at some point if I missed on anything, because you've also been a part of the work we've been doing. So
okay.
Cool. I'm trying to move the slide. Okay, here you go. Okay. I'm not too Zoom proficient, so hey. So like I was mentioning, this is a study that we commissioned. We started work a couple of months ago, and our goal is twofold: to identify the key trade facilitation bottlenecks along the Abidjan-Lagos trade corridor in the textiles and apparel sector, and then to design solutions that would help to unlock trade growth along this corridor and not just with intra-Africa trade, but also with international export markets, and the goal that we have to attract more in manufacturing investment into these countries. This study built on previous work that TBI has done in the 3 countries where we support the governments in the area of trade and industry in the textiles and apparel sector. So, like I mentioned, I'm just going to be speaking specifically to the first part of the study, which is identifying some of the blockages to trade in the region, but more specifically to Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, and Togo. What we did was, apart from secondary research that we did to gather the data on what's happening with textiles and apparel trade in the region, we also conducted interviews with public sector and private sector actors. So for the private sector actors, we interviewed about 12 people or 12 companies. This is just the quick rundown of them across the 3 countries. Also spoke to people in Bangladesh and Italy, capturing Asia and Europe to just have an idea of what's happening there compared to West Africa. And for the public agencies and clearing agencies, we had about 18 interviews. So the key issues I'll be speaking quickly on are feedback we've received directly from these 18 public agencies and clearing agents, and then the 12 private sector industry guys. I just added this one slide from the research that we did. And what we found was pretty much compared to OECD countries, the time to export and import is about 10 times more in cost countries. And again, this is Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and Togo. And it's about 5 times more in these countries compared to OECD countries. So cost of trading is quite high in West Africa. So I'm just zooming in quickly into the feedback that we've received. So what we found was, so we extracted about 18 key issues, which we put into 8 different buckets. And these are mainly information systems, the procedures, logistics, and coordination. These are the main categories of the challenges that we found. So for the information systems, naturally a lot of processes. So this is it's been broken down into the countries where the people give the feedback from, but I'm not going to talk about the countries. You can just see it as I speak to them. But interviewers noted that a lot of the processes are physical and not online, and it's leading to delays. So most of the documents need to be physically printed before submission, when in other jurisdictions, it might just make it easier and faster if everything is uploaded online and they don't have to deal with paper. And then for textiles manufacturers in Nigeria, for instance, they mentioned when they're bringing in grey baft from Nigeria, or they're bringing in grey baft from Nigeria for their processing. Some of the suppliers actually have to physically travel to the border for export declaration. That obviously it's adding on to the time and the cost of trade. And for customs procedures, there are also issues that are leading to delays, again, in time and cost. Extra documentation is needed for imports from India. This is not within West Africa, but stuff happening. Well, they need inputs. A lot of the inputs are coming from outside of Africa. And so this is a big issue for the importers or the manufacturers. Now for Uniworks in Cote d'Ivoire, what they mentioned was it's taking them about 2 weeks or more at the border for clearance, which is impacting their business processes and making them quite uncompetitive compared to what's happening with Asia imports to the region. I'll just jump over 5, but again, people in Ghana mentioned, again, the wax print manufacturers mentioned that customs officers have to physically inspect the goods at the factory every time, and it's delaying the process. The documentation process is cumbersome. There's a lot of delays, which most of the time they don't get explanation. multiple visits by customs officers, it's pretty much just causing a lot of delays. And then for PIA, that's the Arise group who are in Togo now. I think they started a couple of years ago. They set up an industrial park and they are manufacturing within the park now. Because they are free zones company, they're also having to deal with the added layer of different documentation processes that they have to follow through with the Togo government before they can pretty much just take on the benefits of the free zones, and that leads to delays as well. And because of the additional documentations that are needed, there's a lot of arguments in that respect, which I'm not going to go into, but we can maybe in the discussions. But I'll just leave it at a high level for now. And then logistical issues, which we are quite aware of. And under that, it's also impacting on cost and the time. So road transport costs from Benin to Ivory Coast is a lot more expensive than sea transportation that's coming all the way from Asia. So they mentioned it's costing about 6,000 euro per truck to ship a container from Benin to Ivory Coast, as compared to I think that was 3,500 and 4,000 to ship a container from China. And what they also mentioned was, out of that 6,000 euro, 2,000 out of that is just for crossing the borders at Togo and Ghana, and you don't get a receipt for this. And then sea transportation between West African countries is close to non-existent, which we know a lot of the deep sea liners are not doing any dedicated services within West Africa. Coastal shipping is close to non-existent. So that's obviously a big challenge. And then there's the issue of stakeholder coordination, just lack of communication between freight forwarders and importers that are leading to delays. So there's that education and coordination, better coordination that's needed. And then maybe let me jump to policy, quickly looking at the time. So actors in Ivory Coast mentioned that Benin is imposing an in-transit tax for goods that are coming by road from, say, Nigeria. Whereas if it's coming from Benin, obviously you don't have to pay it. So it's an added cost that they have to deal with road transport moving from Nigeria, because a lot of the raw materials, like Tim was mentioning, come from Nigeria as well. And then there's the informal artisans and craftsmen are complaining a lot about the high VAT, which needs to be paid upfront. This is tariffs, but yeah, we captured that as well. And then the very obvious issue of financing, working capital. They've mentioned interest rates as high as about 30%, which is quite high, and is, yeah, caused by long, just, yeah. So yeah, I don't think I need to belabor that point too much, because we all know the challenges with finance across Africa. And then infrastructure, I think I hinted to it a little bit earlier, but the road infrastructure is not very good, which is leading to a lot more time than should have taken. If you're tracking from Nigeria to Ghana, it's taking about 2 to 3 days due to the poor road network. And then smuggling, I think Etienne had mentioned a little bit on this earlier, but what this is actually information coming from the 3 countries, is that unsold excess clothing, which are new from Asia, are actually being shipped to West Africa and declared at customs as second-hand garments, just so they can benefit from reduced duties. And once they come onto the market, that's pushing the local manufacturers out of business, because they're not able to compete with that, really. Tim, before I go to the public sectors, the public agencies and the clearing agents, did you want to add on anything to the private sector, guys, because you're on the ground?
Well, we only have one actual weaver here, so and they only produce a small amount of the fabric for the printers. So we have had a meeting with the printers to discuss this. There's no particular issue with the spinner and weaver we have because they're buying African cotton and they're doing double, triple transformation. But for the printers, and also in the future for the digital printers who are likely to grow, I think there needs to be some flexibility for possibly a fourth option, as I said, in terms of value addition. If the imports from Nigeria can be encouraged, or indeed from other countries making grey BAF, then that would also be helpful to making it more acceptable to go from a fibre onwards route. But the question I think needs to be answered is there a large cost differential, both in terms of the freight cost from Nigeria or Tanzania for grey BAF, for the grey fabric compared to Asia, and what kind of difference are we talking about compared to the 35% import tariff which cotton woven fabrics have both in East Africa and also in ECOWAS. That kind of differential needs to be looked at. I mean, maybe it's a very small differential and that they just buy it from Asia because that's their normal route. If there's a very small differential in terms of the landed cost of the grey BAF between Nigerian grey BAF and Chinese or Indian or Pakistani grey BAF, where it also comes from, then that would be helpful to know as a way of convincing them that a new rule of origin would be desirable. Currently, we had a meeting, and this position internally within Ghana, the three printers, was reserved in terms of the rule of origin for grey fabric, for printed woven fabric. So I think we need to go back to them again and have another meeting about that. But meanwhile, it would be useful to see the price differential from Asian fabric and plus freight, i.e. landed cost, compared to plus the import duty compared to buying it within Africa without any import duty. I'm not sure what the import duty is for grey woven fabric between Nigeria and Ghana, for example. I know there would be zero import duty. So clearly there must be quite a big difference in cost for them to be willing to pay the extra import duty, which I think is 10%. But I'll have to check that from Asia. But that data would be very useful to have, and then to reconvene the three printers again to actually see what they think, because so far there wasn't an agreement internally.
Yeah, I remember we had thanks for that, discussions around the quality, which Nigeria is quite comparable, but then I don't remember for the cost. But like you said, if they're buying from Benin and Nigeria, that must say something about the actual cost of the fabric, right? Which is why even when they're adding 6,000 euro on top of it in tracking costs, is still making some sense. Although the bulk of what's coming into the imports of grey BAF into Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, it's coming from Asia pretty much. But yeah, you're right. That's like an added layer of information. Maybe others have that, other private sector actors on the call have that data, which would be great to add on to this one. But I don't have it.
Yeah, if we have that data, then I think it would be easier to convince the printers to accept a new rule of origin, which is currently change of tariff subheading and or value addition. But if you have a big value addition like 40%, I think that's also adequate. Of course, with value addition, it's difficult to police, though, isn't it?
Okay, you can continue, Kelly, but that's very useful information from Tim. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I'll just quickly run through the public sector. And this is public agency, so like the Port Authority, Shippers Authority, but then also a lot of freight forwarders. So what they've mentioned is they've talked about a lack of training, lack of digitalization, again, issues with the procedures, and then a coordination. So from the public sector, they've mentioned the private sector. So this is freight forwarders are not fully familiar with the documentation processes and customs requirements. And so they end up having to do a lot of back and forths, which private sector complaints waste their time, but then the government guys are also saying, hey, it's because you're not doing the right thing. That's why we're having to let you go back and do the complete and get it done right. And they also mentioned that this is in Ghana, the details within the ICUMS are not correctly entered by the various agencies. Again, an issue of lack of familiarity and training. And then a lot on digitalization. They've mentioned that some of the online models, such as online payments, they've been implemented, but they're currently non-operational. We have to dig a bit more into that to find out why they are not. The workshops are going to address those, but that hasn't happened yet. So these are just the highline. And then less budget for digitalization activities in Togo. That's the feedback we have received. There's also single window that has not been integrated across all the relevant agencies in Togo, which is obviously leading to delays. That issue wasn't mentioned in Ghana because I believe the single window is in place in Ghana, the ICUMS. But Togo has a big issue of that. So the private sector actors also mentioned that it takes just a lot of time because everything is physical. And then in Ghana, people thought that the customs agency should be the last authority to approve within the single window system to release the shipments. Currently, it appears that's not the case. And so by the time you get to customs, if they are the last authority pretty much to do the approvals, then you know, okay, by the time I get to the ports, everything is sorted out. But currently it's not the issue, it's not the case. For customs procedures, people have complained about the number of documentations that are needed. In Cote d'Ivoire, for instance, they've mentioned there are about 15 that is needed for importation, and they keep increasing over the years. Customs department is too slow, and they are not adapting to technological changes, and there are a lot of inefficiencies. That's for Ghana and Togo. Ghana has also said compliance rates from importers to pay duties is low, and there are no punitive measures in case of wrong declarations. I know we had some internal debate about that, but I'm just going to leave it at the high level for now. The customs also says there are a lot of importers that they've been dishonest in the past, and so obviously they are subject to more scrutiny now, which they would say is leading to more delays on their operations. But customs says, well, it's because of what you've done in the past. And then again, an issue of stakeholder coordination also from the public sector side and the freight forwarders. There's a lack of communication in Ghana, for instance, they've mentioned a lack of coordination between customs officers in Accra and Tema, which is leading to increased wait times at the port. Also a lack of coordination issue mentioned in Ghana, in Togo as well. And then resource constraints, which we saw on the private sector side as well. A lack of adequate staff for product registrations. People have also mentioned heavy workload in Togo and Ivory Coast. And then some freight forwarders don't submit the documents or clearance. They submit their documents for goods clearance, and they are waiting for financing. So that's also leading to a lot of these things leading to either delays or cost. Yeah, so that's it for the private sector. I just added in the next a few more of just a little bit more. So this is Akosombo Textiles. They're one of the textiles manufacturers in Ghana, and they went a little bit into details on the challenges they face. And this is also a little bit of details about what go through in pretty much get in a comparison between what happens with Benin, Nigeria versus Asia in terms of how long it's taking them and the kind of processes they have to go through to import grey baft to Ghana. I'm not going to get into it, but if you want to, we can have a quick discussion on it. And then this is Uniwax in Cote d'Ivoire, and their specific challenges, which we summarized in the section that I just spoke on, and also challenges faced by others in Ghana, this PI Arise, FTG in Cote d'Ivoire, and Wadata in Ghana. They've also been summarized and put in the section that I spoke on, but I just added them here as a little bit of a deep dive for the purposes of the working group's work. So that's it.
Thank you. No, thank you so much, Kekeli. Actually, as I was listening to this, I could actually see this is going to be very beneficial to all the working groups because it is touching on all the issues that are vision and strategy for the textiles and apparel sector for the continent should address beyond the NTBs. I think it's so. Thank you very much, and we cannot wait to see some of the solutions that are going to be proposed from the workshops that you have mentioned. Now,
if I may, I can mention this. I extracted this from a deck that's about more than 80 slides, and so if more information is needed on the overarching research that we did before speaking to the interviewees in the countries, I can share that for the purposes of the working group as well, not to be shared externally for now while we validate, but that can be shared as well.
Yeah. I think the private sector team that is here, I'm sure they can benefit a lot from that, even as they engage members of their various industries. So there is your presentation, and then the AFCFTA Secretariat. But before the AFCFTA, so I don't know whether maybe we should get both and then discuss. And I can already see we are going to run out of time. So let's first of all hear from Lucy on the progress that has been made on the rules of origin negotiations, and then we take the presentation from the Secretariat. Lucy, I got from Diana that you have some information to share.
Yes, hello, good morning, everybody. I hope I can be heard clearly. Unfortunately, yes. I have a problem with my camera, so I will not be able to turn it on. Also, unfortunately, we don't have the rules of origin experts from the directorate in the meeting, but then what I can give you is just the outcomes of the last extraordinary meeting of the Council of Ministers. So one of the things to note is, as was mentioned earlier, yes, the rule for Chapter 61, which is articles of apparel and clothing accessories knitted and crocheted, was agreed to be a process rule, so manufactured from yarn, subject to review after 5 years. So that's for Chapter 61. However, there were some exceptions that member states had started to highlight. They could agree to the chapter rule, but then they wanted to bring forward their exceptions. So the agreement at the meeting was that the member states were given a week to submit, a week from when we sent out a note verbal asking them to submit their list of exceptions to Chapter 61. This is supposed to end on the 4th of August. So once we get the complete list of exceptions for Chapter 61, we're going to send this list circulated to all member states. They'll then be given 2 more weeks to consult on these exceptions, and where they have issues, they can raise those issues to the Secretariat. And what will happen is that at the next meeting of the Council of Ministers, the Secretariat is going to prepare a report of all the submissions that we had received on for exceptions to Chapter 61. So in that regard, Chapter 61 chapter rule is agreed, and then exceptions would be agreed at the next meeting of the Council of Ministers. So that is it for Chapter 61. There are, however, a number of rules that are still outstanding. For example, HS 51, 11 to 5113. These would, I could go through all of the ones that are outstanding for textiles, but I believe we already know
No, we don't. Yeah.
That are outstanding.
We don't need those ones. Yeah.
The progress from the last meeting would be the adoption of Chapter 61, which is a good progress, because following this decision of the Council of Ministers, the adopted rules of origin has now moved up to 92.3%. There were also a few lines in automotives that were adopted. So we are currently at 92.3% of adopted rules, which also accounts for 95.5% of intra-African trade. So yes, some progress is being made. If there are any probably technical questions in this regard, feel free to make them. They would be given to the rules of origin experts so that they can join your next meeting and provide you with appropriate responses. Thank you so much, and my apologies for the camera. Thank you.
No problem. No, thank you so much, Lucy. I think every time we meet, actually, there seems to be things to celebrate, and I think this is the spirit. This is the spirit. I know at the back of my mind, I'm also having this idea. Okay, so you're making all this progress. I have heard about from Kekeli's presentation, cotton coming from Africa. And then I think about all the things that are happening in the cotton producing countries. Then of course I get worried. But having said that, I think there's a lot to celebrate. Okay. I don't know who from the Secretariat was going to talk to us about the process of the NTM's resolution. Is it Kwena? Kwena. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Dr. Karingi.
Yeah, so the private sector wanted to hear how you are doing, how we are doing in terms of the NTM mechanism. So the floor is yours, and then we'll discuss yours and Kekeli's together.
Thank you so much.
10 minutes. 10 minutes.
Thank you so much. I'll do my best to be very quick. Let me just try and share my screen. My apologies, Dr. Karingi. I think I have too many things opened.
No worries. Just take your time.
Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to the NTB mechanism. I wanted to share a slide, but with the 10 minutes, I think it's best to go directly to the mechanism just to show you the mechanism. The AFCFTA NTB mechanism, or online reporting mechanism, is a provision of Annex 5 on non-tariff barriers as part of the agreement. We would all know that this was a provision where there was an understanding that even with all tariff liberalization, there are issues that would still come up against the much celebrated openness of markets in the likes of non-tariff barriers. Now, before I go deep into this, just to say that the non-tariff measures division, I know that our head of division, Ms. Funam, attended the meeting, the last meeting, and she may have given just a brief overview of what annexes we are responsible for. We're responsible for the annex on non-tariff barriers, the Annex 5 and Annex 6 on technical barriers to trade, and also Annex 7 on sanitary and phytosanitary measures. Of course, there are other non-tariff measures that are not necessarily these ones, as I will show you. But this is where we are situated within the AFCFTA Secretariat. Now, this provision of the mechanism really was to provide a platform where the private sector can identify and report some of the issues. I mean, the presentation that we've just received earlier on from TBI is one of, tools that are used to identify. But the platform now is where you now engage the different governments to say, this is what is happening in Togo, this is what is happening in Ghana. Can we see how best to resolve some of these issues that the private sector are facing? And the understanding is that the problems that are faced by the private sector, most of them would be encountered in the reason why it's a non-tariff measures issue, would be encountered in their quest to comply, to try to comply where they comply, or to be forced to comply where they're not even aware that they're supposed to comply. A series of these NTBs are available or keep occurring on the value chain in the different products. Now, in the textile and clothing sector as well, there are those that would come up as high as we've just seen in the presentation we just had. So the provision here really, this is the main site. It's going to change. It's going to change soon. But we have one which is a demo site which we use for training. I'll see if I can go to it, but we have the both of them and they're available. So this one, www.tradebarriers.africa is our main site, but we have the demo. The demo site starts with demo.tradebarriers. This is one that is used for training purposes, so that there isn't any confusion in what is reported in the demo site or the training site. Now, without taking much time, the intention really here is for the private sector to report every possible challenge that they face in their quest to export and import, whether it's fabrics, whether it's finished products, whether it's on issues of logistics or anything that is related. And anybody can report on the mechanism. And this is how it takes place. I don't know if you're seeing this one now. This is the demo site. I showed you the other one. Are you seeing?
It has not moved. It has not moved. We are still seeing the.
You're still seeing the same one.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh dear. Okay.
Although your presentation is very clear.
Okay. Okay. Let's do that again, so that we look at the demo. The demo one. Okay, is here. Okay. So this is the demo site. You will see that the look is different. So the look is going to change to what you're seeing into the demo. The new branding guidelines for the AFCFTA are moving towards this. So this is the demo site, but the main site will be launched and relaunched, and it will come into what you're seeing as the demo site. So what I would like to show you here is that on the demo site, you go on the login. This is for the benefit of those that have not seen this before. For you to register, you come and you have to go onto the register as a user first before you can submit a complaint. And after registering here, You then go to complaints. This is where you can register a complaint, registering a complaint here. I'm hoping that it goes. Okay, it doesn't go, but it doesn't matter. This is where you go to register a complaint, and then after registering a complaint, and it then goes into the system. It comes directly to the AFCFTA coordination unit, which is where we sit, and then we vet it. Our vetting means we confirm whether it is an NTB according to the categorization defined by the state parties in Annex 5, because not everything is an NTB according to the Annex. Not everything is solvable through the system. Other issues may be immigration issues, other issues may be security issues, which are not within the scope of the trade agreement or trade policy, even though they are affected. Other issues may be infrastructural issues, as we have seen, which may not necessarily be within the trade policy, even though they affect trade. A movement of goods and services. So once we have received that, we then now engage the focal points in each state party within the government and their national monitoring committees. Ideally, each country is supposed to have their own national monitoring committee, where you have a number of different stakeholders sitting there to be able to respond to some or all of the issues. Because if it is, for instance, you have issues that deal with cotton in the textile and clothing sector. Cotton is a phytosanitary, will probably have a lot of phytosanitary issues, and plant protection units would be within the countries, would be the appropriate people to respond. But you may also have issues to do with pre-shipment. You may have issues to do with testing of chemicals and dyes on heavy metals, which may be issues of national bureaus of standards and other conformity assessment outfits within a country. So national monitoring committees are expected to have all of the stakeholders within. So the expectation is that this would be where the focal points would then take the issue and then respond to it adequately. Now, in terms of responding, how quickly would this respond? I want to go back to this one. How quickly would the countries respond? It depends on measure by measure. For instance, a measure on, for instance, delays in customs, the issue that was raised earlier on knowing what documents to fill, what documents not to fill. I think the understanding of non-tariff measures is that these are policy measures that should be there for any country. If you're requested to provide testing, of any product or any fabric by law, you're supposed to do that. And if you're supposed to meet or fill, provide a certificate of origin for the products, you're supposed to do that. But knowing what is there is another thing. So the issues of information exchange may be easy ones. However, where laws are supposed to be changed now, it goes beyond how soon, the resolution can take place, or how quickly it can take place. So it's very important to understand these dynamics so that even when these are dealt with, then we know that it may take this, it may take that time, or it may take so much time to achieve. I wanted us to come to this. I've opened it on this categories. For instance, one of the issues I read through in one of the countries that is affected on the issues is customs valuation, the issue of customs valuation on yarn products coming from outside, where you have the custom officials not having a streamlined or a known process on how valuation is done. And this is a problem that would need to be resolved by the customs authorities, but it is important to bring them to the light so that we are able to even take them to the institutional structures of the AFCFTA to say, this is what countries are dealing with. Can this be resolved? If we put them up for dialogue and highlight them, it might be possible to resolve quickly some of this. But if they are not in the light, it becomes a big problem for resolution. I don't want to take more of the time, but thank you very much. This can be, manipulated and looked for, experienced on the demo site. To see how it works, even for the private sector, for those that have not yet experienced it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kwena. It's very, very, very clear. The private sector was very keen to hear from you. They asked that question, and that's why it was felt necessary that we should hear from the Secretariat. It's good to hear that some of the you've given examples of how some of the issues that were coming up in our first meeting about fraud, misstatement, and all those things, to see how they could be tackled through this, and also the examples, the twin examples from Kekeli's presentation and what you have presented to at least give some comfort that something can be done. Okay, we've had to the two presentations. I think it would be good to open the floor, just like the other two meetings. Get some insights of what you take out of this. Is it good? Do we see like we'll be able to come to the point where we are able to concretely talk about the NTBs and the solutions? So I'll give the floor first to Tim and then to Faisal.
Yes, hello. My question was not about the NTB so much as I'm just thinking about the rules of origin and, for example, for knitwear. And I can see immediately that if you wanted to replace imports of knit fabric in the whole of Africa with currently locally available knits, there would be a shortage of capacity. So I'm wondering, what would the common external tariff be? Is there any idea of that? And is that sufficient? Is it high enough to encourage industrial formation, but not too high as to encourage smuggling? So obviously that capacity needs to be built, and that's part of the idea here. But I'm just wondering what would happen for at least 2 or 3 years if there wasn't enough, since there obviously isn't enough capacity to cater for all the knit imports coming in at present.
This would be a good time to bring in Faisal. Faisal, you're muted.
Is that me? Sorry,
yes.
Sorry, Steve. Well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed the presentations, both by TBI and then the Secretariat on the NTB mechanism. So I just wanted to comment on both issues, the rules of origin and how we move forward. I'm very pleased to hear that we've actually made a lot more progress, Stephen, like you did. So I think it's great. Each time we listen to the Secretariat, we hear that more progress is made. So I'm not quite sure how these negotiations are taking place, because this seems to have moved from like where we were in Nairobi. That's great, and that's good. So I'd really like us to confirm that 92%, 92.3% adopted rules of origin. That's excellent news. So I think for our purposes, it's really such a pity that the technical people who are really responsible for these negotiations, they should have been here. It would be great even if we could meet them as soon as possible to confirm this, but I'm more interested then in, how can we help this group? And I think how we can help is if we can get a very granular report on the outstanding rules, the rest of the rules on textiles and clothing. What exactly, are the areas of dispute or the gap, between different countries? Because if we know that, then we can see how this group can mobilize those private sector industries from the countries that are, still in dispute with each other or, have a difference of opinion. And we can create a conversation between the private sector and the government officials, but really listen carefully to the private sector from those countries, from each of those countries, and then draw on our technical expertise, because we do have people who have some expertise, both in the Secretariat, but also from UNCTAD, from some of the guys who came to offer their support and assistance. And then we can see how, we can, offer some options maybe for the outstanding issues. So that's my first suggestion. But for us to help, we need a granular and very detailed understanding of which countries, which industries have concerns, and how, and then we can consider how best to accommodate for that and how to build a sort of convergence between those countries so that we can close that gap as soon as possible. So that's the first one. On the second, well, I'm very pleased, with the work that I've seen the Secretariat done on the NTBs. But again, I think that this is really an issue about the implementation of these annexes, particularly, all of them have to do with trade facilitation, customs, cooperation standards, and SPS, they're all related. But, at the heart of it really seems to be trade facilitation, customs trade facilitation. That's really the core issue. And we need to engage with the directorate in the AFCFTA responsible for trade facilitation, and what is the work program that they envisage, and then how can we, work with them. Some of it will have to happen continentally, some at the national level. That's really the operational area where a lot of the changes have to take place. But then some changes can also be made at the sub-regional level, where quite a lot of work has already happened by the RECs. So let's see, but we have to work with the Secretariat's, strategy or work program. And then our job is to draw the private sector into active engagement with the, so that we have a collaborative effort in building that implementation strategy. Thanks. So those are my two suggestions, Stephen, going forward.
Thank you, Faisal. So far, I'll give the floor to you, Etienne, but just give me a minute, because the point raised by Tim again brings us back to, once we agree on this work in the next agenda item, we'll agree whether we want to front load some consensus building on the recommendations to the rules of origin negotiators, which I think aligns to the point that Faisal has also made, that maybe we need to also have these technical guys from the AFCFTA working on the rules of origin to come. The message that we got from Lucy is very good, but can we get now the granular of what is outstanding so that we see what are the options that are making it difficult for the conclusion of the others. And at that point, Tim, the proposals that you are making, including in this question about inability to meet the demand, to meet the demand using the supply within the continent, that would also be there. I remember this is probably one of those issues that is holding back some of the lines. Because remember, like we had from Nigeria presentation last time, they did indicate that I can't remember the name of the company. They use also synthetics. And some of these synthetics are not even produced here. Some of the polymers used for producing some of these things are done elsewhere. And so the question of the rule of origin that operates for you to meet the demand for some of these things also needs to be very conscious of that capacity. So your point, Tim, is well taken. Again, we will come back and agree maybe that is what is going to be the focus of our next deeper discussion when we meet next time. Now, for the second point about the most of these things, what we have had, what the Secretariat has presented, being most of the annexes dealing with the trade facilitation. I think this is basically, if you see, one of the things this working group is supposed to do, Faisal, is basically we are supposed to pinpoint those NTBs that are going to make it very difficult for us to build a farm to our bodies, value chain for our clothing sector. That's what we are supposed to do. Obviously, along that, maybe we'll interact with them with these other issues in the annexes. But I think the industry will tell us, because we want to make sure that we keep our scope within what we can chew under the TNA. Etienne.
Thank you very much, Stephen. I found the presentation from Kekele and Kwena extremely informative, especially the feedback from Kekele on the experiences of the companies. But I think that all of those we should not directly prescribe to non-tariff barriers, some of the problems that they are having there. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't comment on those. For instance, a lot of the things that the companies were worried about is largely around infrastructure. And so perhaps as a working group, we should then also talk about the importance of a strong infrastructure, continental infrastructure policy and infrastructure work, not just policy, but work, to ensure that we deal with the fact that, for instance, it's so much more expensive to move products between countries than it may be to import products, because that's ultimately how we will stimulate industrialization. So that's the first thing that I think we should say something on that. And similarly, Kekele then also spoke about some of the companies, for instance, having difficulties accessing working capital. Once again, that may restrict their ability to export, but is not a non-tariff barrier, but should not stop us from commenting on this. And this is perhaps finding a way, kind of goes back to the continental industrial policy, where both governments, but also private sector finance is channeled to grow industry on the continent. And so once again, I think something we can comment on to the Secretariat and to member countries. The one thing that I am concerned about is, where companies, for instance, in Kekele's presentation spoke about, high taxes, for instance. I think that's a difficult thing for us to raise, because ultimately that's a policy decision by countries, and that's maybe a way for them to raise money from the fiscus to provide services to their citizens. So I take the point that somebody may not be happy with paying as much VAT as they are paying, but that to just insist that there shouldn't be those taxes, I think are concerned, and we should just distinguish between actual non-tariff barriers and a policy choice, especially around taxes. And then the last thing I wanted to suggest is to link what Kekeli said to the presentation by Kwena on the website. Kekeli spoke about the fact that some exporters were worried that they didn't have all the information. So it wasn't, if you're exporting to Togo, you don't know exactly what documents are required by a company, by the Togolese government. And perhaps, is it not worthwhile, Kwena, as part of the Trade Barriers website, for instance, to indicate that countries should indicate there what documentation they require, Stephen, so that when I export, I can also go there to check that the Togolese government would require the following from me. And perhaps, we move away from it just being a stick to hit governments with, but actually some information and useful information that may assist exporters as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Etienne. Yeah, I actually hear you going to the workshops that Kekeli said that they are going to have the solutions workshop, because I would imagine in those solutions workshop, some of these points that you've raised, especially the NTBs versus policy choice, are going to come up. I think the recommendation about lack of knowledge of what is needed, I think most likely, I think that's a very good recommendation upfront to the AFCFTA Secretariat, that we need to sort of unpack a bit some of the information that countries need to provide. Yes, Kuen, I think you want to come in on this.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kringi. I think thank you very much for the comments. I didn't mention the non-tariff measures data collection, which also makes part of the information sharing that Etienne is just referring to. That it's one of the work streams that is coming on very strongly, even from our side. You will be aware that UNCTAD, ITC, and others have been working globally, of course, including the continent, on collecting non-tariff measures data, which are policy choices, as Etienne puts it, that are there within various laws of countries that the private sector have to comply with. Now, some of this we understand that the problem is not necessarily that the private sector does not want to comply, but it's an issue of knowing about them, but also the procedural obstacles, how to go about complying with some of the laws that are becoming a burden to some of this. So what we are currently doing, even with the work going on in collaboration with UNCTAD, is trying to see how we can best borrow data that is already existing, even within UNCTAD. I know that UNCTAD has been working in a number of countries within Africa where data on non-tariff measures has been collected, which we are making available also for the private sector, because once you are aware of what requirements exist, complying becomes easy. But if you're not aware, or this document is stuck somewhere in somebody's office or within government printing or wherever it is, it's not easily accessible to the private sector. So this is part of the work that we are also trying to do, to try and bring the information available within the context of the AFCFTA. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. Now, on the first point that was made by Etienne about things that are not necessarily NTBs, your point is well taken, and I think it's good to have Paizo here. And I think I saw also Tess is also here, because like I commented after Kekeli's presentation, Working Group 1 and Working Group 2 will benefit a lot from what TBI has presented. And I think we can only, as Working Group 3, reinforce the messages to say that even if we have these rules of origin working and the NTB is resolved, unless we have these other things put in place, which I think are going to be part of what is going to come out of the strategy, the continental strategy that is being framed by Working Group 1, then we will not be able to have good results. But I think it's a good point. All of us, as you saw in my presentation earlier, I had said that we need to have a good view of what is happening in Working Group 1 and Working Group 2. And I think this is an indication of why that is important. Now, so we were supposed to listen to these presentations, and you can see I'm trying to think on my feet on how to facilitate in an effective way. After which, and we are taking notes. We are taking notes, so we will see what are the things that are emerging. After which, once we listen to this presentation and the discussion that we have just had, and some of the recommendations that have come out of that, then we are going to try to discuss and agree on the work program that I had presented. Yeah, so before we go to that item, I see we have 20 minutes. Is there any more comment that we want to make on the presentations? I have seen Kekeli inviting the private sector to the workshops. I think all those who are present here, I think it would be good if you are able to be part of the workshops that will be coming up with solutions out of the findings of the TBI work. So I think we need to get in touch with Kekeli to see what are the dates, is it hybrid? And yeah, so that we can get the industry players from other regions benefiting from these case studies from these countries. Yeah, you can also invite, I think my colleagues also colleagues from UNCTAD, ITC, I see Melaku here. It would be good for us also to be part of that, even if it's just to listen to the interaction between the private sector and the government from those countries and how they're going to propose some of these solutions. Okay, any comments? Okay, so if there is no, okay, Kekeli, yeah, please, yeah, thanks.
Thanks for that, Dr. Karinji. I just wanted to say yes to all that you've said. We're envisaging this would be either end of August or mid to end of September. We're working around people's annual leave times and all of that. But I can share more details as we get into the planning. So far, the plan has been to have it in-country, but I see the benefits of a hybrid as well. So we might be putting that on the table as well. But yeah, everyone is invited, like I mentioned.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I was going to share the slide again that, where is that? If I can get it again. I go down to, sorry. Yeah, I was going to, you can see this slide. No, not this one, I think. Yeah, this slide. So the first item there is which speaks to what FISO contributed, and also the points that have been made by Tim. So that's what we are proposing that we do next, and then we will come back assuming that we are able to conclude on that, we can then come back to draw on the work on the TBI and also the presentation by the private sector, which I think they would be continuing to do that on the specific NTBs. The workshops, I think, Kekeli, that you have talked about might also be very helpful. I'll give you the floor, Noncedo. Might also be very helpful on number 3, where they'll be having proposals for solutions, and then maybe governments will be saying, "Oh, this is what we have done. It has worked. It has not worked." Yeah. So, Noncedo, you can come in here.
Thanks, Dr. Karingi. One other issue that we need to include in the activities is the invitation to the trade facilitation person from the AFCFTA to share with us the work program, so that as we discuss in these meetings, we are aligned to the plan of the AFCFTA. I thought, let me just add that on the activities. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So under the number 1, we need to invite again the rules of origin team from the AFCFTA, so that they can come and give us the much more details that we need on the progress that has been made, and what are those issues that are really that are there, and tell us as a group what it is that we can do. Now, maybe, Noncedo, I don't know, in planning for our next meeting, I don't know whether the Secretariat can also help us or is it the school, to really get private sector from some of those countries that could be having those outstanding issues, outstanding concerns that have made them not to conclude. I don't know whether, for instance, Kenya is here. For the last 2 meetings, Kenya has not been part of this. So maybe it would be good to have Kenya here. And I'm not saying that because I'm a Kenyan. I'm saying that because I know Kenya has one of those positions that could help, that we need, probably has not been resolved. Morocco has been here, Mauritius has been here, South Africa has been here, Nigeria has been here, Ghana has been here. So let's get somebody to help us invite those private sectors, so that at least they can articulate the issue in this working group. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any comment on how this is going? Yes, Noncedo.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't want to make this a dialogue. We will ask the Secretariat to assist to get the Kenyan private sector, but I think we can also talk bilaterally with TBI, because they are everywhere in the continent, so they may assist also to get the private sector on board. Thanks.
That would even be better. That would even be excellent. Yeah. Yeah. Tell them to attend these meetings. Yeah. Etienne.
Thank you, Stephen. I just wanted to add one point to the work program. You'll remember when we initially had our meeting, we spoke about the fact that we should probably also discuss how to ensure compliance with the rules of origin. In other words, what could be done by customs authorities, for instance, to check that, or what are the kind of mechanisms that can be put in place by customs authorities to make sure that the agreed rules of origin are not undermined. And I don't have the experience or knowledge to discuss that, but if there's anybody who can maybe share with us a presentation on that, that would be extremely useful for the working group to maybe express a opinion on that, and also share that with the Secretariat.
Yeah. Tapere. Tess.
Hi.
I know it's you.
Hi, Stephen. Can you see? Can you see me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you. Let me remove the stop share for now. Yeah.
Yeah,
I can see you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. No, a couple of quick points. First of all, to apologize. I joined very late. I was in another meeting, and actually coming to my office with traffic in Istanbul was so difficult. So I was late. So my apologies. So I didn't hear the presentation. It's really my loss, but I'll try to catch up. So that's the first point. Second point is, I don't know, you may have discussed it, and I'm sure Malaku and you could help us about the annex included in AFCFTA about NTBs, which mandates establishment of a mechanism for monitoring and categorizing implementation of NTBs, including online system where private sector can report type of non-tariff measures or barriers that are becoming an obstacle to trade. I don't know whether there was a presentation.
Yes, we had a great presentation from Buena Secretariat. Yeah.
Very good, very good. So that's you see, because I missed out, I wasn't quite sure. The other point is Etienne, I think, has raised a very, very important point. The focus so far, understandably, I presume, is on the finalization of the rules of origin discussion and negotiations, in particular in the textile and apparel industry. This is the impasse now in the process. But he really is raising important point. The rules of origin, agreeing is one thing on the rules. The most difficult part of rules of origin is implementation. And UNCTAD has done a lot of work on this, much more complex, compliance and the capacity of customs and other officials to implement effectively has been a major challenge. And that in itself has become non-tariff measure in terms of disrupting trade. So along with the efforts to finalize the rules of origin part, the last part of the negotiation, according to Secretary General, there are two areas. One is the automobile industry, which some advance has been made, and the most difficult one is textile and apparel. While that is going on, I think the compliance issue and how to implement once has been agreed is also something one should really seek the views of private sector, since they are the ones who has to face these rules, and they are the receiving end of these regulations and rules. I think their views will be useful in the future when it comes to implementation. In fact, in many regional agreements, the challenge has been the implementation, not necessarily agreeing on the rules of origin. So I think that's really, I just want to reinforce Etienne's point. That's it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tess. I was going to call out Brenda, but I can see she has raised her hand, but also to acknowledge that Joachim also sees that as a key issue that we have to deal with as a working group. Brenda. You're muted.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Sorry, I'm using a screen which doesn't have my camera. So if I can just speak without my camera on. Yes, I totally agree with the issue which Etienne has raised, and also what has just been said by our colleague from UN Technology on the issue of implementation challenges. The issue that I want to bring to the attention of the working group is that there are ongoing efforts to try and upskill the customs community to bring them to speed to be able to implement the AFCFTA rules of origin. The WCO has got a program which is being funded by the EU, and this is called the EU WCO Rules of Origin Africa Program. And its aim is to support customs administrations on the African continent to improve their capacity to deal with the rules of origin, not just in the AFCFTA, but the multiple rules of origin that they are implementing under the many trade agreements that they have to comply with. So what I wanted to suggest, maybe this is an opportune time for us to partner with the WCO to bring the program manager to come and make a presentation on this. Why I say so, because they're also working very closely with the AFCFTA Secretariat. They have supported them to develop for the electronic tariff system, and they're also supporting them with the various capacity building programs. So my suggestion is that maybe we can consider to invite the program manager for this WCO Rules of Origin program. I submit, Chair.
Thank you. I think that's a brilliant idea. In fact, that's why I was going to call out to you, because I was going to say maybe you know someone. So both UNCTAD and the WCO can make presentation on this question of enforcing. I don't know. I find enforcing a bit difficult. How to deal with the issue of compliance on the rules of origin, whatever is agreed at the trade agreements, so that also the private sector can also ask questions on what has whether it's working or not working. So we take that on SEDO as we are going to add it also as an item. It looks like it will be among the top. It will be among the top three. Yeah, it will be among the top three. Okay, so generally, I hear like we are agreeing on the issues that have been raised as areas of work of the working group. Of urgency now is to work on this issue of the rules of origin. So that should be our focus in the next, between now and our next meeting. At the same time, we should also alert both WCO and UNCTAD that we would want them also to start maybe preparing on how they can make presentation on the question of compliance. And of course, we will also ask the AFCFTA Secretariat to join us on this for the granular presentation. And the TBI and the AFCFTA Secretariat will help us to see whether we can mobilize a bit more the participation of the private sector that that we need to have in our next meeting. So maybe what we will do in the next meeting is we will just give a summary with a focus on the rules of origin and where things are, then listen to the AFCFTA Secretariat, and then have detailed conversations on what are the options of how we close what is outstanding, and what this working group can do to support the negotiators. So if you agree, we could leave that as the agenda for our next meeting. Tim? No, you did not raise your hand. It's only that I saw your mic go on. Okay, so can we call it? Yeah, I'm actually trying to say that we will not deal with this issue of the delegation of responsibilities and the coordination with the other working groups. I think we have sort of touched on this Tess, did you want to say something on the coordination with the other working groups? Just in passing, we had it as an item, but I think on the delegation of responsibilities, maybe it doesn't seem like it's yet time to maybe the council members can continue facilitating even in the next meeting. Yeah, Tess.
Well, I think as we said from the beginning, coordination between the three working groups is absolutely essential if we want a coherent strategic plan, which is the ultimate objective, and a vision, private sector vision. We're going to articulate as the end a coherent vision then coordination, the work done by the three groups is very important. Non-tariff measures, as you know, are increasingly becoming complex instruments. In fact, what's becoming even more complex and difficult is analyzing their effect on trade and so on. They're becoming more sort of multi-dimensional. So they overlap with some of the work we'll be dealing in the working group 2 when we look about capabilities and competitiveness and issues. We'll be touching on non-tariff measures as well. And I'm sure on working group 1 as well, when trying to develop a strategy and a vision about the industry, non-tariff measures, rules of origin will become very important. So as you said, we're taking notes, and Nansendo, I'm sure, has good notes. So it's very important as we develop the work of these working groups. At some point, we may have to see how we could jointly see the common message and threads coming out of the various discussions. Unless we do that, then we will have sort of discussions a bit isolated from each other, from the various topics, although they overlap. It's very systematically divided responsibility. Working group 1 will work at the policy issues, strategy issue, vision issues, the big picture. And working group 2 will look at capability, manufacturing, and otherwise innovation, competitiveness, key elements for developing a very dynamic, competitive industry. And 3 deals with policy instruments, nitty-gritty type of rules and regulations and technical and otherwise that may affect trade. So, I mean, it's clear that the demarcation of the work of the various working groups. The question is, we have to make sure that we don't sort of work in isolation in such a way at the end when we try to put together a vision, which, as I said, is the ultimate objective, we'll have difficulties. So we should continue to address this issue as we develop the work of the different working groups.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. So colleagues, we are also invited, we are encouraged to join the other working groups when they are meeting, and Onsendo and the team from the school normally share these dates, and they don't collide actually. The slots are done in such a way that we can cross attend, if I may use that word. Okay, there was a comment that was put on the chat. Please, how soon can we be informed about the outstanding areas issues to inform any input by the working group? So this is going to be for the next meeting, Joachim, and I think we meet once a month. And then there is all this holiday question. So Anon said, when is our next meeting? I think it is already in, yeah, there you are.
Yes, our next meeting is on the 7th of September at the same time from 11 to 1 o'clock South African Standard Time. So we will share the dates again with yourselves and the summary of the meeting.
Yeah. Okay. So colleagues, I think we call it a meeting for now. And thank you so much once again for your active participation and all the ideas. I hope some of the ideas that we have not discussed in details, we are not going to lose them, so that they form part of what we're going to discuss next time.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.